is Sam, ID 5618394.
My name is Rajveer, ID 6015184.
My name is Shaulis, ID 6014085.
And I'm Tinder with ID 6018302.
And we are from
IT Department.
Faculty of Science and Technology, Assumption University of Thailand. And this video is going to be about negotiation in requirement engineering. So let's begin. Negotiation is part of requirement engineering when a company is trying to build a new system. Requirements have to be carefully collected and selected between stakeholders. Therefore, there's a need for negotiation between them to agree on a complete and consistent requirement.
Okay, now let's see the whole process of the RE first to see the whole picture of the RE. As you can see, these are the three techniques of the RE, which are inception, elicitation, and elaboration. These three processes can give you a set of requirements, which are the user requirement, system requirement, domain requirement, and business requirement. But these requirements are not complete yet, so the next two processes, which are negotiation and specification, can give you the real final requirement, and the last process is requirement management to manage the whole process. So as we can see from the previous slide, that the negotiation process is the process after the elaboration process, which means we get the complete requirement from the previous process already. But really, is it really complete from the elaboration process? The answer is no. Why not? So let's look about some problems of the negotiation process. The problem is that there are some requirement conflicts from the previous process, which is the stakeholder conflict. Because the different stakeholders have different objectives, the interests of different stakeholder groups can conflict, and even their culture had affect the opinion. And by this conflict, it can lead to the failure of the system in the future if we not fix it in this process.
For example, well-known companies have a lot of projects to do, which needs a huge amount of capital investment as they will need a lot of workers. Here, the conflict may arise between the IT manager and the director, as the director would want to spend less on the project and IT manager would not agree with him or her. As we are talking about stakeholder conflicts, here are some more examples of stakeholder conflicts. The conflict between interaction designer and programmer. As shown in the slideshow, interaction designer will concentrate more on interacting the users rather than concentrating on the use of the system, whereas programmer's motive is to process the function of the system. They don't think of the system to look attractive, as they think the system should process whether it is attractive or not. Another example of stakeholder conflict is the conflict between the owner and supplier. Owners and suppliers may have a conflict due to their language barrier, as it is not necessary for both to share one culture. So it becomes a conflict when they have to deal with each other for transporting the product. As shown in the slideshow, the owner would like to lessen his cost of the products, while the supplier would want to make profit from his supply of products. Business owners who provide high levels of service will have customers who will recommend their products and services to their associates, which carries more weight than advertising. But if their products could not satisfy the customers, they would not prefer their products to their relatives or their associates.
This is an example of conflict between owner and user or customer that can lead to the failure. And the other example of the sentence that said conflict are not failure but can make failure could be also between in the team, such as If the conflicts are not removed yet, the new requirements will change all the time, and the developer can have a stable, continuously development on the system. This can also lead to the failure of the system or business. And the other example is about the teammate. If the teammates have conflict each other, they might can work happily together, and that is also can lead to the failure of the system. So now let's move on. What is the objective of negotiation process first?
Requirements negotiation is the process of discussing requirements, conflicts, and getting a compromise from all stakeholders, meaning that all stakeholders has to be part of the negotiation in order to agree on a more stable requirements. The aim of requirements negotiation is to discover problems with the system requirements and reach agreement on changes to satisfy all system stakeholders. Input and output of negotiation process. The input of negotiation process is a set of conflicting or overlapped requirements. After the negotiation process is done, output is a compromise set of requirements, and this output becomes an input to another process of requirement engineering, which is requirement specification. Continuing to the development process. Developers want two main things: flexible contracts and stable requirements. Why is stable requirements important for developers? Because if there is a lot of changes in the requirement, instead of moving forwards to a new process, developer has to go back and change and revise the old codes. Just like in the picture, instead of moving to build a new line of brick, the person has to go back and revise the old brick. So the objectives are: 1. Get same direction. Make explicit for each conflict. Make sure that everyone is satisfied to continue to work together as a team. And second, win-win. Discussing requirements conflicts and getting a compromise from all stakeholders. Reach agreement on changes to satisfy all system stakeholders. In a win-win situation, both sides get what they want and satisfied with it and happy. The third objective, conclude real requirements. Get the compromise set of requirements for the next process of requirement engineering and stable requirements for the development process.
Even there are some solutions for the negotiation process already, but this technique still have some limitation. Let's see what they are. However, the negotiation is not perfect. Because this process we have to finding an acceptable compromise, and it can be time consuming. It should be take too much time for this process, and the possible solutions are agree when the requirements are illicit, and it's very hard to really elicit to the requirement for each stakeholder. And another problem is about not overcoming the cultural barriers.
Sometimes stakeholders may come from different countries with different cultures, so it is always difficult to negotiate in such kind of situation. The biggest limitation of some old techniques is that the conflict is still there, because sometimes people don't tend to forget the problem easily, even it has already been solved. It remains in their head because they don't understand why the problem was solved that way. Apart from the general problems, there are also some other individual problems as well, such as lack of patience, lack of confidence, going unprepared for a negotiation, and being too rigid. And now we are going on to the 3 O techniques of negotiation. Technique 1. Voting. This technique is simply to ask all stakeholders involved with the requirements and or the conflict itself to vote on a set of alternative options for a solution. The solution with the most votes is accepted as the resolution of the conflict. Technique 2. Overruling. This technique is aligned with the organizational hierarchy. The more senior stakeholders' requirements or proposed solution is the one that will be taken forward as the resolution. Technique 3. Definition of variance. This technique is a way that is selected to develop the solution where the different stakeholders can apply their own variance to the solution as parameters. This way, the different stakeholders get their preferred solution implemented. Weakness of these old techniques. Weakness of Technique 1. Voting. Sometimes the voting result could be 49% versus 51%. The number of people on the winning side is just a little bit more than the losing side. So by voting, it is going to ignore too many voices from the losing side sometimes. By this, it will lead to that the conflict are still in mind of almost half the people in the organization. The requirement has not really been discussed because we are just making decision by voting. Weakness of Technique 2. Overruling. Lack of quality of opinion in the organization. Higher hierarchy take control and ignore the lower, while the lower is not complacent at the same time. The lower hierarchy could never explain their viewpoint and share to the others. In the future, if there are any problems that only the lower hierarchy can see, they will just keep it and not tell anyone. Weakness of Technique 3. Definition of variance. The process is taking too much time. It results in having too much different types of solution. Everyone is not going under the same direction. It could lead to more conflict because that each one develops their own idea personally.
So we asked ourselves the following question: what are we going to do? As we all know, there are 3 main processes of negotiation. The first is requirement discussion, the second is requirement prioritization, and the third is requirement agreement. So we decided to create a new technique based on this main process. We also decided to have the following features for our technique. It should prioritize all facts. Requirements are considered before it is implemented. Clarification. Equal decision making is offered to everyone. Agreement without coercion, so we don't force anyone to agree without their consent, and we aim to bring a win-win situation. Trade-off on the middle ground is the name of a technique, and since conflict cannot be avoided and needs to be tended before it affects the whole negotiation process. So what is trade-off on the middle ground? So trade-off on the middle ground is closely related to the compromise technique. It is a combination of several techniques that has been seen. It mainly focuses on equality of each stakeholder's requirement. It tries to avoid any conflict that might remain after the negotiation process ends, and basically it tries to find the middle ground of the conflict stakeholders. The next question we ask ourselves about our technique is how problem is solved. Trade-off on the middle ground solves the problem using the following techniques. It collects all facts and influencing factors relating to the requirement that are in the conflict. It keeps an open mind and directly elicits the need and real requirement of each stakeholders. It prioritizes all of requirement and factors. It clarifies the positive and negative aspects of each requirement. Trade-off on the middle ground finds the middle way for the config requirement and combines those positive aspects of each requirement. It makes everyone come to a win-win situation, and it confirms that everyone having the same agreement. Even though this technique is not at full 100% to make everyone happy, it reduces most of the conflict and replaces it with the win-win situation that each stakeholders can accept.
So what are the outputs of our new technique? Let's have a look. After the negotiation process by the trade of the middle ground techniques, the output are a compromise set of requirements, which is the input of the next requirement engineering process, the specification. The other output is the better flow of work because we clear all the conflicts, harmonious within the organization, and comfortable of open mind working among the workmates. So if next time they have any problem, they will comfortably to talk each other and not keep it in mind. And the last one, the most important one, a win-win situation where all stakeholders are satisfied with the negotiation and come to an agreement. This is the most important thing of this technique, the agreement as the same attitude. So this is all about a video about the negotiation in requirement engineering. Thank you for watching the video. If you have any question, just contact us by the address here.